Marius Oosthuizen, who is a scenario planner and futurist for the Gordon Institute of Business Science. Marius, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, as we try and make sense of the impact of the US tariffs, we heard Minister Ntshavheni warning of a potential jobs bloodbath if these tariffs are imposed. In your view, which sectors of South Africa are most vulnerable, and what could the knock-on effects be across the economy?
Good evening, Paul, and lovely talking to you. Well, first of all, to say that the Minister is correct that there will be a significant impact on the economy. Our own calculation puts the direct job losses at about 30,000 jobs. But given South Africa's dependency ratio of 3 to 4 people per income, we're really looking at 120,000 South Africans losing their income. And of course, those South Africans have family that look to them in a country where very few people are formally employed. The knock-on effect of the loss of revenue to the fiscus means that an additional couple of 100,000 South Africans' social grants won't be financed because of the losses of those jobs. And so I would argue that, in fact, the Minister and the government are completely underestimating the economic impact. I think there's a level of economic naivety involved when we begin to look at the size of South Africa's economic challenge in terms of lack of growth, stagnation, 12 million unemployed people. This is a step backwards, and it is a step backwards that we could have avoided.
Should consumers be worried at this stage? I mean, we're hearing on one end the successful telephonic engagement President Cyril Ramaphosa had with his US counterpart Donald Trump yesterday, but looking at the finer details when it comes to products on the shelves and consumers, is there a cause for concern?
I think there is a cause for concern, but I don't think the nature of concern is what's on the shelves. You know, this is not going to fundamentally affect what consumers find on South African shelves. Yeah. It's going to affect what American consumers find on their shelves from South Africa. As a small country in the global economy, South Africa desperately needs to export things in order to earn income, in order to be part of the global economy. And if we are unable to do that effectively, that's a loss of income, it's a loss of economic success to South Africans. And I think that's what we should be concerned about. I would go a step further and say that, unfortunately, a positive conversation between the president and the president of the US really means nothing. At the end of the day, South Africa needed to manage its diplomatic relationship with the US much more effectively. This is the largest economy in the world. After Donald Trump's presidency in 3.5 years' time, the US is still going to be there. It's still going to be 400 million very wealthy people who want to buy things from someone. They could have bought them from us. And similarly with China, even though the minister talks about diversifying trade, the Chinese will be around in 4 years. What we needed to do now was to really cement a positive relationship with the US under the presidency of Donald Trump and really take advantage of the fact that this is, at his core, a transactional business leader leading the United States. And so, in my view, we could have turned this into a massive opportunity. You know, South Africa, short of just selling the few things we have currently, we should have started a conversation with the US that said, what is your national interest in Africa, in the region? What is South Africa's national interest in terms of rapid economic growth and infrastructure? And how do we form a partnership to unlock some of that potential? I don't think the government has succeeded in doing that in this particular instance.
Is this just about tariffs, or could it signal a fundamental reshaping of South Africa's trade relationship with America?
I think it is fundamentally reshaping that relationship. And I think in a broader terms, you know, this is at some level really about geopolitics. You know, if you look at the last sort of 5 to 10 years, what has South Africa done? It's flirted a little bit with Iran. It's joined BRICS and participated in conversations about de-dollarization. It's taken the case to the ICJ against Israel because of its pro-Palestinian stance. Now, when you listen to the ANC, that all sounds like very important things that South Africa is doing because of our sovereignty. But in reality, if we remove the naivety, we understand that the Chinese have an interest in South Africa. You just mentioned Mr. Vladimir Putin from Russia calling the South African president. Why would he call the president after he's spoken to Donald Trump? Because he's wanting to insert himself in the middle of that relationship. And similarly with Iran and the Palestinians, South Africa has been influenced by other lobby groups who are also fighting a geopolitical game. And I'm afraid to say, I think at some level, we've been used by those lobby groups to advance a particular global agenda. Did South Africa take a case to the ICJ against Bashir al-Assad in South Sudan? I don't think we did. And so why is there that unequal treatment of war crimes or genocide? I think it has something to do with the geopolitical forces playing themselves out on South Africa while we pretend that it's actually our own sovereignty that's at stake, which of course it isn't. These are countries that all want to do business with us in their own interests. And what we need to do is we need to articulate our national interest. You know, I've read the document by Durko on describing South Africa's national interest. And between me and you, it's really a fluffy document full of all kinds of philosophical principles with very little to do with the hard-nosed needs for South Africa to grow its economy, create jobs, create a better future for South Africans.
Your point has raised an important question in my view. Why is South Africa caught in the middle of this at this very moment? I mean, you mentioned the geopolitical tensions playing out. South Africa caught right in the middle of it.
Absolutely. Well, in some respects, you know, South Africa courted this situation. You know, we think of ourselves, if you listen to the foreign policy establishment in South Africa, they talk of South Africa as a moral superpower. Now, I personally have a problem with that. I think that Nelson Mandela was a moral superhero, but we certainly as a country, you know, we're quite corrupt. We have all kinds of state incapacity, ineptitude. There's very little that I would look to say we're a moral superpower in the world. But what we have done, because of this sort of self-perception, is we went and inserted ourselves in a schoolyard fight between two big bullies, two very large countries with very strong international reach, militarily, economically. And what we've done essentially by engaging in some of these activities is we essentially picked a side instead of being non-aligned and neutral and being a little bit smart, you know, dancing with various partners on the dance floor is, I think, what we should have done. And we've sort of put ourselves in the middle of it unnecessarily, up there with more controversial states, perhaps like the Iranian regime and others.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening, wrapping up that conversation with Marius Oosthuizen, a scenario planner and futurist from the Gordon Institute of Business Science.